Hi, this is Kevin Clark from America Magazine. I'm here with Bill Canny he's Executive Director of the U.S. CCB's Office of Migration and Refugee Services. We are very concerned here. It's been a conversation among many of the bishops about the blowback, the reaction to what happened in Paris over the weekend, and the church's role and your job in dealing with the Syrian refugees. Can you tell me what the nature of the crisis is and how you think the American people should try to think about these matters?
Yeah. Well, first of all, Migration and Refugee Services at the conference is front and center in resettling refugees in this country, along with about 80 Catholic charities, organizations around the country. Certainly, there's concern now that there may have been a connection between a Syrian asylum seeker in Europe and the group, which was a group of people actually who were French and perhaps Belgian citizens, that there was some involvement and the person slipped into the country. So there's concern about...
That hasn't been verified yet.
It's not been verified, but now there's a reaction in our own country from governors of many states that we that are showing reticence to take Syrian refugees into the country. Let me just make a few counterpoints to that. First of all, the people who are fleeing ISIS are fleeing for the same reasons that anyone flees. They're being persecuted, they're being bombed, they're not being allowed to express their freedom of religion. There are Christians and other minorities involved, so they are fleeing persecution. It is not in our interest, certainly, as America and as an open America, to shut the doors to folks who are fleeing persecution. Secondly, the people who come through the refugee resettlement program are the most vetted people in the country. They're the most vetted immigrants, migrants, or as we call them, refugees in the country. They go through an extensive security check. They are primarily interviewed in refugee camps overseas, outside of Syria, where they have been languishing often for a number of years. So these people are certainly not a credible threat by any way, shape, or means.
It's not like these people are washing ashore on the Atlantic beaches,
No.
as the Mediterranean beaches.
They're interviewed. The security checks take 18 to 24 months. We know where they're going in the United States. Oftentimes they're going to join families, distant relatives that they have, but also through agencies when they get here, like our own, and Catholic charities. We help them integrate into society. So it's a much different operation than what we see, for example, in Europe, where people show up at the shores
and people
or
are
at the
kind
borders.
of just pushing across the borders.
That's correct. This is a much different program.
And we haven't even accepted that many refugees to this point. I think there's fewer than 2,000 that have been.
That's right. So far, fewer than 2,000 to date. With the crises, however, the government did decide that we would settle 10,000 more in the next year, Syrians, along with the 75,000 other refugees that we resettle every year. It's a very controlled program, and frankly, we oftentimes pick the most vulnerable people to come over and resettle in the country, those being certainly the elderly and the sick, often unaccompanied children. But again, oftentimes it's people who are joining their families and joining communities.
Now, the United States has been accepting refugees for decades. Can you think of any instance of a terrorist infiltrating that system and causing mayhem here in the United States?
I cannot. Through the refugee resettlement program, I cannot think of an instance in these many years, as you say, decades, that we've been resettling refugees.
What do you think the Catholic community, how do you think they should be responding both materially and politically, I guess, to these new challenges and this reaction to the crisis in Europe?
After Syrians and other refugees, frankly, not just Syrians, began to boat and walk to Europe and actually to die along the way, we had an excellent and loving response from the Catholic community, parishes calling us, Catholic groups, congregations, dioceses. And so we're actually involved in expanding our resettlement network to meet the needs and also the hopes and desires of our Catholic community and others around the country to be more helpful and to welcome these people who have suffered for so much for the last 5 years. You have children who haven't been able to go to school. You have people who have not been able to get proper medical care. You have people who want to work and haven't been able to find work in the countries they're currently, where they currently are. These people, we want to show them solidarity. We want to show them love, as, of course, Pope Francis told us to do during his recent trip to the United States.
And I guess it's worth reminding people that a good number of these refugees from Syria and Iraq are Christians escaping the worst kind of persecutions we've seen.
There are certainly, we know that ISIS has targeted Christians among other minorities. There is a good percentage of Christians fleeing Syria also in these refugee camps. And as the United Nations and the U.S. government goes about selecting refugees, certainly Christians are among those who are selected to come to the United States.
And I guess it's also worth remembering that many of the victims of ISIS are also fellow Muslims.
Yeah, so 90%, you know, the vast majority are fellow Muslims. Again, these people are fleeing terrorism, they're fleeing oppression, they wanted to get out from under the war, and certainly in many instances under ISIS, they've been persecuted and they're looking to establish new lives.